So, this has been on my mind for quite a few days, and it's mostly regarding Batman vs. Superman, which I was not very satisfied with the movie. And I blame Marvel for this. Um, I blame Marvel because they started a trend that made a bazillion dollars. And it works for them. And there's no denying that it works for them. And for some instances, their movies do work well with this formula. Some don't work, with or without it. But that's another conversation altogether. What Batman vs. Superman is trying to do is something that only Marvel can accomplish. And instead of following what worked for them, DC decided to try and emulate Marvel in the worst way possible, rather than just following how they did things good in Man of Steel and expanding on that. They didn't do that. Instead, there's lots of build up and contextual things that only some people who are already familiar with how the DC universe itself works, it it's confusing to average audiences. And I think that there could have been a much better movie, and it's not because of Zack Snyder or Chris Terry or anybody. I think it's these corporations that they feel pressured because when they take these quarter of a billion dollar risks on these big budget superhero movies, and in order and they think that in order to make their money back, they have to make these shared universes, you know, because Marvel's doing it and they make a bazillion dollars every year just because everything they do is great, right? And I think that it's starting to really have an effect on some of the bigger tentpole movies that come out every summer because now there's a pressure to have everything connect, you know. I have a message for Warner Brothers, and it's mostly just we know that Justice League is coming. You don't have to set it up for us. You don't even have to include Wonder Woman into a movie where Batman and Superman go at it mentally and physically. And I have a feeling that maybe George Miller's version, yes, look it up, viewers, on the internet. It's out there. There are plenty of other instances where Justice League and Batman vs. Superman were going to happen regardless of a cinematic universe to begin with. But now these corporations think that because these trends are working really well for somebody else, they think that it's going to work for them. But some of the movie's biggest problems were that it just lacked focus. And somebody on Facebook actually posted a comment, and it basically said, this wasn't a movie, this was a bunch of products being sold to you. Don't forget to pre-order tickets for Wonder Woman coming out in 2017. It's a shame. It really is. Because I think these companies are perfectly capable of putting out these movies without having to do all this excessive crap. Because pretty soon they're just going to end up being these long-running, big-budget television shows. At least that's what happened to Star Wars, and I'm not even going to get into that. But now we have to pay $10 to wait an episode per year to follow through with a bunch of characters that are in this really long-running TV show. And that's not good. That's not what movies are. Movies, they have their own contained stories within 2.5 hours, and 2.5 hours is a long fucking time. 2.5 hours is clearly not enough to tell all the stuff that they wanted to tell. So why not just follow Marvel and do a Netflix series, DC? Like, if that's really the route you want to go, for Christ's sake. Batman vs Superman is an entertaining movie, but that doesn't mean that it's good from a narrative perspective, from the perspective of that it makes sense by comparing it to Man of Steel, which I also know is a movie that a lot of people didn't like. But I personally loved it, mostly because of a few things, and that it brought out the human side of a character that most people would probably argue is the least relatable superhero in history. And for me, I think they pulled that off. But that's probably my bias because I'm a huge Superman fan and I was completely blown away by Man of Steel. And they didn't have to reference anything. They didn't have to do an end credits scene. They didn't have to include these like half-assed characters throughout the movie to do absolutely nothing to show that there was a Batman in that universe. All they had to do was just put it in a movie and wait for the internet to find it. Because that's what happened with Man of Steel. I'd never noticed it, but when the articles came out for the internet, there was all these like little pictures that were zooming in on certain shots in Man of Steel that were showing the Wayne Enterprise logo. And everybody's like, oh my god, Batman's in the same universe. And of course there's a LexCorp sign, and there's all these other things that reference like Booster Gold and stuff like that. And, you know, that worked. We knew that Batman was coming, DC. We knew that they were coming because you were able to let Zack Snyder do his thing as a creative filmmaker and be like, look, here's, I want to have a Batman in this universe. Let me put the little Wayne Enterprise logo somewhere. I'm sure the fans are going to love that because they're going to look for that because that's what the internet does. Okay? And they didn't do that. They have to spell it out for everybody now. Now they think that because Marvel's spelling it out for the kiddies, DC now has to do this. And it's really disappointing. And I feel like it's after a really bad breakup or something because I saw the movie on the day of its release, so 2 days ago from today. And I have to say, more and more of the negative reviews are pretty valid. And I think that a lot of the stuff that was criticized for Man of Steel was pretty much addressed in Batman vs. Superman. And they were just kind of basically like, this guy's got an answer for this stuff. And now that I think about it, they didn't really have him answer for it. Because, spoiler alert, Luthor just blows up the entire courthouse and there's never a hearing in the first place. So not only does Superman not get his chance to kind of, like, okay, now they kind of get my perspective, let's see what happens. No, we have to set up Justice League, so we gotta include the obligatory, like, Marvel-esque, like, ooh, LexCorp has a file on every metahuman, which is just only happens to be Cyborg, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman, and the Flash. No Green Lantern or, no Hawk people. In this cinematic universe, we can only afford this many superheroes for one movie anyway. So, as a Superman fan, as a fan of Man of Steel, and as a fan of Zack Snyder, I'm just disappointed more than anything. And this isn't the first time that this has happened. A lot of these big tentpole superhero films really kind of hype you up. And I think that their marketing department is way more talented than any of their production departments because, this happened to me for Age of Ultron. This happened to me for the Avengers, both of the Avengers movies really just were. The first one was underwhelming. It was fun and it was entertaining. It was entertaining, but it was underwhelming. And I think that that's the issue with most movies, especially all these superhero movies that now feel the need that shared universes are the new thing that's going to make us $1 bazillion. And, these movies stopped being movies, after the Avengers succeeded. after Marvel Studios just decided we're going to break all the rules of movies and just do whatever the hell we want. It's a tragedy, honestly. And Disney's, kind of the enabling parent of this growing problem that we got to keep franchises alive even at long after they've been, put to rest. Indiana Jones 5 is coming out, and now every studio is like, scrambling to keep up with Disney because they own some of the biggest franchises in history, including Star Wars. I would be pretty afraid too. But I don't think that these studios need to come out and start replicating their process, because I think that they're better than that. Because Disney is more than just a movie studio. And the fact that they're trying to set a trend that will change movies forever, I think that's wrong. I think that movies need to be their own thing. They tell the entirety of a single universe in one film. That's all you need. And if there's a sequel that's merited, there's a sequel. That's how movies have always been doing things. They're not these long-running, big-budget television shows. It's just, it doesn't work as well because you don't get enough character in 2.5 hours to really do it justice. So if you're going to make these movies like this, Hollywood, then just put everything on the internet and make it just one long-running Netflix series. Because that's all you're going to accomplish.